Ugh. As I mentioned to y'all, I'm definitely coming down with a sickness. My Amazon will be delivering my cold medicine at 2 o'clock this afternoon, which means I don't have to walk across the Harvard Square to get to the CVS. Worth it for $3. So I'm getting sick. Oh. So I'm not really going to be able to read today. I have to kind of respect my voice. So you're going to have to read one of those works, which isn't a problem. But I did want to ask you, you're getting written feedback from me. Because I give you a little bit of feedback when you first read it, and then I go through and I go carefully and I give you more detailed feedback. Are you getting feedback from other people in the class? No. Okay. So let's be more mindful. When I teach this class in person, if you three had showed up, I would have each of you have 3 or 4 copies of your paper. You would hand out the physical copies, and someone would read the physical copy, and everyone else would have their pen and paper and be able to make notes as they go. I'd like you to do that, if at all possible, giving comments on the Google Doc form, which is the same form that I'll give you comments on. That's good. We can have a community of comments, or you can download it and you can put your own comments on it. So at least try to put some ideas on the page during class. And ideally, really, you'd go and reread it like one more time and give some comments on the Google Drive for your fellow classmates. But I don't want to ask you to do that formally. I don't want to give you one more thing to do. It would be valuable, though, both for getting feedback from not me, from people in your class, and to practice giving feedback. Because some of what you're seeing here when I'm editing for you is I'm trying to model some of the tricks that I use when I edit professionally and give you kind of, and part of a writing class should also be practicing giving critique and comments, not just as we do when we discuss in class and talk about overall themes, but line to line comments. Now, you can see that I can type those really fast as someone's reading. You don't have to do that. But it'd be great if you could just, and this is totally on you, but if you could like commit to yourself to going back and maybe just giving 3 comments, and even if that's just summarizing what you said in class, or even if it's just, do a quick read through and just, if there's any parts that are confusing or any parts that are good, but I want us to also practice giving comments because that is another essential skill in writing. And like everything, how more often can you hear this? Like everything, writing takes practice. Writing makes choices. So that'll be part of it. I'd mentioned earlier that I'm thinking of giving you the week off next week because I have spring break at University of Houston and at Harvard, and I think it would make sense for my own sanity to not have class next week. So this is just straight canceling class. Now, I will give you tasks. So you'll have some stuff to do, but the idea of canceling class is that should just be, X more hours of you working on your theses because we're getting around the halfway point. So at this point, we'll see where we're at after 3 peer edits today. Are you finding, let me see how to phrase this. Okay, let's go around the room. Let me know where your draft is at. Just speak that out to me, where your draft is at. And by this, I mean, do you have 6 pages that you've developed really carefully, or do you have 20 pages? Are you rewriting sections or are you generating more? Because at this point, we need to start pushing toward everybody being in the generating more. And a lot of the refining that you're doing right now needs to be dictated on the more that comes later. That makes sense. It's sort of like you come up with a thesis, but then you invariably rewrite it and change it as the project passes. As Stephen Colbert famously said at one point, I prefer opinions to facts or data because the facts and the data may constantly change based on learning more things, but my opinion will never change. And even my father will cackle at that. I didn't tell it in a very witty way, but you get the point. Like, you want to have a flexible opinion that will change when you encounter new data. And as you are writing, you're in many ways generating more data as you go through the process. So you should be regularly revisiting your thesis, not your topic, but your thesis. Okay, so we'll have next week off. I'll have a couple of tasks for you to do, though, so it'll be expected that you're writing, but we just won't meet. I'm also kicking around 2 new assignment ideas that I want to get your feedback on. I haven't done these before, but I'm so steeped in. Oh, and I was telling Allison that the piece that I was working on, I sent out to my editor last night. So I'll post a copy of that for you so you can see how it went from outline to first draft. And then when I get comments back from them, I'm going to post those too. And I don't know what phase will be at the end of the class, but I want you to be able to kind of follow that process just to see it, just to see how it looks. So you'll have an idea when you all eventually go and publish things. Okay, so here's my 2 assignment ideas. 1, we are now at out of the Harvard Divinity School and the Center for the Study of World Religions publishing opinion pieces. We started calling these op-ed pieces, but we've changed the name to, I think, be more appropriate, research reflections. In a research reflection, you write 800 words, responding, summarize, and reflecting on the implications of your work for a larger audience. It's very much an op-ed model. Now, I'm editing all of these for the CSWR, so I'm thinking about this genre and learning how to edit it well and teaching people how to do it all the time. I think that it could be a useful assignment for us. So have you take your thesis that you've written so far and turn it into an 800-word opinion piece. And that'll really, you have to fine tune everything, make it for a general audience. So that's one idea. And I'll give you my pedagogy behind both of these as well. The other idea is to have you write 5 pages about your thesis topic or about your thesis, but it's not an analytical piece. It has to be a short story, a play, a something, even a poem, but just something different. Or like Janvi would not be that hard to turn her work into her essay into like a travel blog or something. And I'd be comfortable with her doing that as long as she's writing something new. So my idea behind these 2 are the opinion piece, because that's a genre that's worth writing and it refines your thesis. The creative piece is based on all my thinking about creativity. And I find that I think what would come out of that is you would end up you'd come to some interesting conclusions, but you'd probably find yourself writing some stuff that would work as cool, like more informal anecdotes, sort of like John B. so good at doing when, she'll give a descriptive piece of people around the temple. I think you would surprisingly generate stuff like that. And often I find that, and I think Helen Sword would agree with me, those types of a little bit more informal, creative things, if you pop those in to pepper your piece, can really have a large effect. What do you think of those 2? Or is there one you prefer? Or?
I like the creative piece idea. That feels like it would breathe life into what I'm writing.
Well, and I was thinking about yours, H. Not that yours is boring by any means, but I wanted to see what it would look like when you start writing from a different genre and see what comes out. And my guess is out of that project, you're going to find 2 paragraphs that will make it into your ending thesis, but they're going to be like intro parts or transition parts or something that's just it's going to pop, and that'll really, I think, work with the rhythm of your piece more. So y'all like the creative one, huh? Okay.
I like the op-ed. I'm not really
All right.
the creative one makes me anxious.
Well, and you've read my piece about creativity and pedagogy. Of course, it makes you anxious.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I assign it. But it also stimulates different parts of your brain and your
Totally.
memory. and it causes you to process things differently when you're thinking about a topic creatively.
Yeah.
So I've got one for op-ed, one for creative. John B, it's down to you.
I have to go with creative.
Oh, she's the decider.
Sorry. I'm
Good. That's
sorry,
easier for me to
Alyssa.
grade and write up anyway.
I
It's a
kind of
lot
figured
less
I would.
work for me. We'll think about going back to that op-ed idea. Do you want to do, how about in 2 weeks, we come back and we're going to do the creative piece, but I don't, we'll share it, but I don't want to do it like peer editing. I want to do it in a different way. Okay. I want to do it like a writing seminar. Has anyone ever taken a creative writing class or a writing class? You ever been to a writing seminar? H, describe a writing seminar for me. Well, for all of it.
From what I remember, I did like an environmental creative nonfiction writing seminar. We did
Perfect.
like some small groups reading. I mean, similar to what you're talking about, like we had it kind of printed out. People would make marks and things like that. Yeah, that's what I remember is like doing things in small groups.
Yeah. So in a larger seminar, you'd break down to like groups of 5. But in like a smaller upper division, say creative writing seminar, which I've never taken, but I've seen them on TV, and I've sat in on them, and I was an English major. What we'll do is you'll have your thing written out, right? And I think we'll also we'll distribute them over Google Drive as well. And what you'll do is we'll have the author will read. And the idea is, so as you're working this, you remember you're going to be reading it out loud. And if you go into these writing workshops, if you go out into an MFA writing workshop, you'll see that fiction writers, short stories, poets, they sit around and they read their work all the time for a number of reasons. One, you need to hear it just to see it, to really see it clearly. 2, you need to hear and observe how other people react to your work. And that's hard to do when they're reading silently. And 3, I would say the act of talking it out makes you more ready. You've read it out loud with your voice, so then you're ready to talk about it more. So I think what we'll do is for the next class, so that's in 2 weeks, we're going to do, and we're going to call it Write Up Writing Workshop, not peer edit. So we're going to workshop it. Maybe I can find, there's got to be a bunch of multimedia stuff on this somewhere. I'll put together something for you. So does 6 pages sound right? You'll have 2 weeks, something creative. Now, it can't be longer than 6 pages, John B, because I could see you giving me 20 pages with ease. No, yes. So why do I always limit to 6 pages? Writers make choices. As we learn to write over the years in our careers, we think more is better. Now, at some point, you, like H and I will have to read 85-page papers and grade them. Trust me, the 7-page paper is not a better paper. And it's not, and you don't want those last 2 pages because people they're not making choices when they're like, I'm not going to worry about the deadline. I'm going to put in everything I want. Make choices. 6 pages total, absolute maximum. If you have more than 6 pages, you're going to be reading right along. I'm like, you're done. 6 pages. You're done. So 6 pages, make choices, be effective. And as for this creativity, I really want you to be straight up creative and experimental. And how do you think I'm going to suggest you do that? Spontaneous and generative writing. I want you to just play around with a couple of genres. Just take 10, 15 minutes for like, write a newspaper, write a play, write a poem, write a what. But whatever you're doing, write a screenplay for all I know, or write a short story. I get a lot out of writing up my work as a short story, turning it into a narrative form. And somehow when I do that, I come to conclusions, especially when I'm doing like literary work or philosophical work that I wouldn't have gotten before, because it comes out of like the dialogue or the storytelling. My master's thesis was on the Purohita, who's the main chaplain for a king. And I started thinking about how Purohitas and kings interact in the Arthashastra and in the Manusmriti and a bunch of Sanskrit sources. And then suddenly I could see, and I have never written this up other than the master's thesis, that in fact, I think Krishna is the Purohita to Arjuna. When he is taken up when he's chosen between the two cousins, the one cousin picks Krishna's entire battle-ready army, and then Arjuna picks Krishna, who will not fight, and becomes his charioteer. But I have these Vedic stories about Purohitas, who are charioteers to kings, and Purohitas doing all sorts of magical combat and ritual and whatnot, and also doing political advising. And the more I look at it, Krishna doesn't fight, but he's doing some magic and giving some advising and all of this. So I think Krishna, and I got to this idea by imagining charioteers and Purohitas and just kind of thinking through what like a scene between them would look like. And it came to this huge insight. That doesn't always happen, but it does sometimes. And as to the value of using narrative and imagination, I will refer to you to the draft of the piece that I'll send to you later today. It turned out well. Allison gave me feedback, by the way. Allison, assuming they allow me to do footnotes, you will be in one. Yeah, I do this with people who give me comments as I draft, and you'll see this. Y'all remember this trick. You put a footnote right at the beginning and you say initial drafts were, or I shared drafts with, and then you give these names and you give a shout out to anybody who gave you feedback. This does two things. One, people like seeing their names in print. And two, if your people are cool, it makes you look cool. You're like, oh, David White looked at this. Oh, like, you know, I look at my buddy Jason Birch's stuff. And I'm like, oh, just initial drafts, just had Alexis Sanderson, just take a look at that for you, did you, Harnack Isaacson? You cool Australian bastard. I love Jason Birch. If you ever get the chance to spend time with him, he's lovely, and his wife is amazing. Okay, so that's going to be our writing workshop for next week. I'm excited about it. It's experimental. We'll see what happens. I think it's going to be good. Okay, so we are ready to start today. We have piddled away 20 minutes. So notice that my voice comes back when I'm teaching. And then immediately after I stop, my voice is significantly worse. I blow my voice out every time when I try to teach like this. So I need to shut up. So sort yourselves out and be sure you have access to all of the Google Doc forms. And like I said, if possible, while you're listening, practice trying to give comments on that Google Doc. And it's okay if everything ends up on that Google Doc, or if you want, download it and put your own comments on it and then send it to the person later. It's up to you. I'm going to end up commenting on the big Google Doc. I don't mind you having your comments there as well. I mean, the only thing that's difficult there is then you have so many comments to read, but I think you're getting adept at that at this point. Okay, y'all, I'm excited to hear where we're at. Should I elect someone to run the show? John V, you're running the
first.
show. Your job, John V, for this class is to say, it's your turn, you're reading, we're reading your work. You're up, you're the ringmaster.
I would like to have my work read by, I don't know, Allison. Is that okay? Yes, and I submitted the 6 pages. And I'm looking for clarity. And I don't know if you want me to say where I'm at right now so far in my thesis.
You know the go through the thing that I usually do.
Okay.
I'm very pleased that you're ready.
I always feel behind and like I'm holding my breath. I am revisiting paragraphs and kind of like doing more research about them, especially the Mahavidyas and the relationship of the Shaktipita, the Kamakya Shaktipita with the lingam, because I saw many lingams next to all the pitas that I visit. So I want to have more information about it. So I'm like revisiting, researching, always feeling behind. Need clarity. Thank you.
We all always already feel behind.
I also feel behind Genevieve, so we're in the same boat. All right. Would you like me to begin, Genevieve? Okay, here we go. The power of the goddess is called Shakti. It is not limited to female power or energy in particular, but is all power and energy. and it is an attribute of Kamakya. This power is both life-giving and death-dealing. Therefore, recognizing both aspects is crucial in worshiping the goddess, making Shakti Pita a powerful concentrated point of harnessed divine energy. Pitas are shrines to the goddess, representing her seats. These designated sacred locations, referred to as pitas, are believed to be sites where the goddess herself sits or dwells within our world. Considered the most important Shakti Pita in South Asia, the Kamakya Temple complex, see Figure 1, dates back to at least the 8th century of the Common Era. Nestled in the tropical forest of northeast India near Bhutan, Nepal, and China, settled in the lush region of Guwahati, Assam, atop the green hill of the Nilachala Blue Mountain or Kamagiri, the mountain of lovemaking or desire, and the banks of the Brahmaputra River running at its base.
Okay,
At this
hold on a second. I wanted to come back to this one. So you have, it's either Kama Akya or Kama Kya. I think it's Kama Kya based on the
Kamakya.
Sanskrit. So Kama means desire. It secondarily means lovemaking. And you're getting that from, was it from Rosati, correct?
Rosati, yeah.
I think you can keep it in there, but just be aware. I would put desire first and then lovemaking second, because the primary Sanskrit word kama is desire, or maybe not. Wait a minute. What about amorous desire instead of lovemaking? Well, you do what you want, but lovemaking that's kind of more of a secondary one. I really like amorous desire. Just think about that. Thank you. I don't think you need to remove it. I want you to be aware that a Sanskritist might read it and say, it means desire firstly. Okay, lovemaking, but that's all I had.
At the summit of the Nilachala hill resides the temple of Kamakya Ma. Inside the temple, deep down the narrow and steep steps, it is said that the most powerful Shakti Pita of them all is in the darkness of this cave. Her palpable energy showers down the slopes of the Nilachala hill into the valleys of Assam and the Brahmaputra River. Kamakya Devi can be felt through the valley of Guwahati from the lush land with fields covered in green and black tea, endless varieties of rice, unique fruits and vegetables growing on the lands of Assam to the wettest place on the planet Earth, Cherrapunji, a former state of Assam. Kamakya holds a significant place in the history of tantric practice, being one of the earliest centers where it was practiced. It was also the birthplace of some of the most important tantric texts, such as the Kalika Purana, which were instrumental in shaping the philosophy and practices of this ancient tradition. One of the mythical stories of Kamakya links the mountain of lovemaking to the death and resurrection of the god Kama, known as the god of desire and love. According to Assamese tradition, Kama attempted to shoot the flower arrows of love into the meditating Shiva's powerful third eye in the hills of Assam. As a result, Kama was burned to ashes by Shiva, making Kamarupa land a sacred place for the goddess. Another myth surrounding the story of Kamakya is that in this sacred land of Kamarupa, the yoni of Sati fell on the Kamagiri hill, now recognized as Guwahati in Assam. The yoni became a stone representing the goddess Kamakya. To this day, the yoni, an object of great reverence, is still enshrined in the temple atop the Kamagiri hill in the Brahmaputra Valley, known as the Yoni Pita. It holds a position of significant importance among all the Shakti Pitas, as stated in the Puranas. The yoni-shaped stone is considered to be the most potent part of the goddess's body, and its presence in the temple of Kamakya is a testament to the divine energy that permeates the area amongst the Assamese community. According to one of the most well-known Hindu mythologies around the Yoni Pita, Sati threw herself into the fire, dying by yoga or broken heart, after knowing that her father did not invite her beloved Shiva to a yagna, fire sacrifice, yagna. When Lord Shiva carried the body of his wife Sati, overcome by grief and anger, he stomped the earth. He was destroying it. Lord Vishnu noticed and decided he needed to stop Shiva and alleviate his sorrow, dismembering Sati's corpse with his disc. The sexual organ of the goddess fell from the sky into the blue hill at the site where the Kamakya temple now stands. Kamakya, a place of worship where the yoni of Sati is revered, was constructed in 1565 CE by King Conch Narana Rayana in the form of it exists today.
So
The-
that one's a tricky one. You want to
Yes.
try saying it after me.
Yes.
Nara Narayana. So
Nara Narayana.
Narayana. So Narayana, he who rides a man.
Cool.
Nara, and Nara also means man. So it's almost like he who rides a man, Narayan, but it's like they're doubling the Nara to make it more reverent. And Narayana means he who rides a man, associated with Vishnu. If you look back when the Vaishnava deities looked more like Shaiva deities, the images are of this god Narayan, he who rides a man, like riding a man who kind of looks like a tantric corpse and corpse practices. So once upon a time, the Vaishnava deities were not so friendly.
Okay.
That was your Indological lesson for the day.
Thank you. The history of this site dates back to India's medieval times and is believed to have ties to Shan dynasty, which governed by Brahmaputra Valley during that era. On this sacred most seat named Kubjika Pita, which is Nila Kuta, and there the goddess resides with me in secret, the female organ of Sati, which had fallen on this sacred most place hill, was broken into pieces, and then the pudendum of Sati turned into stone, in which the goddess Kamakya herself resides. The Kamakya temple draws a significant number of devotees throughout the year who come for darshana, view or sight, or pray and acquire the blessings of Kamakya and the rest of the goddess that resides in the temple ground. People travel or pilgrimage from very far and near to visit the temple complex, eager to touch the Shakti Pita and honor the goddess. Whether her visitors come to mediate, spend the day near the Devi, or offer a ritual to ask for the fulfillment of their deepest desire, or thank the goddess for her help, Kamakya Ma, like a good mother, welcomes her children through the passageway and long concrete steps of the mandir, where we can encounter visitors from every caste, gender, age, and religion. During the monsoon season in June and July, the temple closes its doors for 3 days to observe the annual menstrual flow during the Ambuvacha Mela, issuing forth of rain festival, which is believed to nourish the earth. This time is considered significant and powerful, and the Brahmaputra River turns a shade of red due to the iron oxide present in the soil, which flows over the yoni. This occurrence gives the impression that the goddess is menstruating and is believed to be a potent symbol of fertility and regeneration. That's really cool. The temple's closure during this time is a solemn observance of the goddess's power and influence over nature. Despite having numerous representations of goddesses embellished around the Kamakya temple, these are considered manifestations of Shakti. Kamakya Ma is represented only by her murti, the yoni-shaped stone, being described through mythology in the Kalika Purana text. Inside the cave, on that stone, there is a very lovely yoni in the form of stone, which is 12 angulas in width and 20 angulas in length. Gradually,
Angula.
And sloping and lying along the Basma Shaila, the hill of ashes of Kama. It is reddish in color like vermilion or saffron, who fulfills all desires. On that yoni, the amorous goddess Kamakya, who is the supportress and the source of the world and the primordial force, the eternal one, always amuses herself in 5 different forms. The yoni-shaped stone is believed to be the first anthropomorphic representation of Kamakya, the mother goddess. Devotees visit the temple to pay homage to her power and offer rituals and gifts to the Yoni Pita. Dr. Paolo Rosati, an independent scholar who conducted extensive research on the Kamakya temple, explains that coconuts and their milk are frequently offered as symbolic substitutes for the heads and bone marrow of ritual victims, which were closely associated with heroism, manhood, and power by headhunting tribes in northeastern India. Every morning before 6 a.m., hundreds of visitors purchase their entrance tickets to the Kamakya temple if they desire to go where the Pita representing the goddess resides. The Kamakya temple dates back to the 8th century CE. The main or older parts of the building is made out of large stone blocks and high ceilings, which with just 3 exits that have been blocked with metal grids, keeping the visitors with no ticket outside. There are some fans that help circulate the air inside the temple, since offering and some rituals are going on constantly, making the air feel extra humid combined with the smoke coming from the ghee candles. At the center of the room, there is a structure composed of different levels, and a small murti representing the goddess has been installed at the top of the structure. However, is importantly to clarify that this is not considered the iconic image of the goddess. There is no iconography of Kamakya. The goddess is believed to be more than an image. Some believe the goddess is composed of the Mahavidyas. Others like to believe the goddess Kamakya is the hill of the Nilachala nature itself. In order to get to the yoni-shaped stone of Kamakya, one must descend the steps, which allegorically represents a journey into the depths of the underworld. Once inside the sacred chamber, the yoni pita is entirely immersed in a flowing stream of water, symbolically representing the yoni sexual fluids. This mystical and profoundly spiritual space is one of great significance and reverence among the devotees of the bleeding goddess, Kamakya Devi. In addition, Kamakya has mistakenly been linked to another well-known figure believed to date back to either the 10th or 12th centuries, taking the form of a sculpture depicting a goddess in a squatting position, displaying her vulva, known as Laja Gauri. This sculpture is affixed to the outer walls of the Kamakya temple. At the Kamakya temple, the priests refer to a figure called Laja Gauri as the menstruating figure. They apply sindoor, vermilion, to this figure, which is believed to represent birth and divine creation in places like Gujarat and Karnataka. Despite common belief, Laja Gauri is not a direct representation of the goddess Kamakya. Regardless of the abundance of information available about the history and myths of Kamakya, there seems to be a lack of understanding or perhaps misrepresentation around the iconography of Kamakya Devi that is not included in studies of the Kamakya temple. An interesting example is the 6-headed and 12-armed representation of Kamakya Ma, which embodies nature, feminine energy, power, fertility, love, and desire. Surprisingly, this representation is often the first visual representation of Kamakya that appears when searching for information about the goddess temple online. This raises questions about the limitations of our understanding of this menstruating goddess of Guwahati, and the influence of outsiders' perspectives, people non-affiliated with the tradition, or even the people within the community wanting to create a more approachable image of the Shakti Pita of Assam. How does the commodification of religious symbols, such as the menstruating goddess, impact the spiritual significance and reverence associated with the Shakti Pita? This discovery provides an excellent chance to explore the symbolism of Kamakya at a deeper level. Visual art is an incredibly powerful way to tell a story that goes beyond language, highlighting the meaning and significance of the story it represents. Additionally, such art can intensify the sense of safety surrounding it.
All right, John B, you're running the show. The next thing I do is I ask people to talk about it without the author speaking.
Oh yeah.
You're all good.
Any comments?
Uh,
I don't know.
What Dr. Ulrey has highlighted right here on the, or I don't know, can you see that, Johnny? Where your
Yeah.
last question that you presented, how does the commodification of religious symbols such as the menstruating goddess impact the spiritual significance and reverence associated with the Shakti Pita? I kind of feel like that would be a really great place for you to engage earlier in everything.
Mm.
And it
Okay.
might be an interesting way for you to frame an argument so that people know what it is that you're going to be discussing in the thesis more, right? Because your language is beautiful. How you can structure this and explain the feeling of the temple, that's amazing. I love reading your
And it's gotten significantly better from the first time we saw this. You've been mixing data and evocative stuff. Alice, no, that's right. John B has been mixing data and description in a much more skillful way than in earlier drafts.
Yeah.
And I would argue that, in fact, the descriptions have become more evocative as they've been refined, and connecting them to data makes them more effective. Sorry if I cut you off, Allison.
No, that was more important. But yeah, I guess as I was reading, I was just wondering, where are we going? What are we going to be looking at?
Yeah.
What is going to be the point, right? So I feel like that would be that last part, like Dr. Ulrey always says at the conclusions, that a lot of times needs to be moved from the bottom all the way to the top. I feel like that needs to be going at the top.
But I agree. Also, she could go in a little bit more into, like, if you're looking right at the beginning, we've got all this stuff about blood, energy, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I think there's a lot going on with feminine energy, blood, and whatnot. My pal Shravana has a short piece that I would like Janvi to remind me to send her. And when I say remind me, I'm not going to, unless you send me an email saying, do this thing. Sorry, that's the way it is. That's on y'all. I think there could be more done with sort of more general stuff on what is Shaktiism, what is Shakti in Tantra, what is the complementarity of male and female in Tantra. I would say looking back at David White's book, Kiss of the Yogini, would be really useful there. Now, you'll notice, funny, I've been asking all of you to be really specific, and now I'm saying, well, what about the general? That's because we're starting to get to a point where you've got enough specifics that you have to connect it to wider, larger arguments. Generally, I find students at Naropa try to connect with the larger arguments too early. We're getting to that point. Maybe not quite yet, but at some point, each of you is going to have to be able to make some connections to wider religious studies and discourse statements. Shut up, all of you phone stuff. Okay, sorry. That's my blood sugar things are going kooky. Okay, yeah. All right, I'll eat a cookie. It's fine. Other thoughts? Janvi, run this thing.
H, please share your thoughts. Thank you, by the way, Allison. I will move that to the top. That's a great feedback.
I have to do the same thing. All of a sudden, I'll be like, that's
Yeah.
not where that goes. That has to go up here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I highlighted that. That was my comment. Well, I was asking also, like, maybe this is what you might go into, but how does America or the West, quote unquote, have anything to do with that leaning into commodification?
Yeah.
And yeah, just what's the I was gonna say
H's
dialogue, but like,
instincts
yeah,
are
what's
solid
happening
there. However, you want to look at the Western influence, but you also want to look at the Indic things, because
Yeah.
Hindu modernity is a thing. So sometimes
Yeah.
we see this movement toward, like, I know what's happening at these temples right now is that they're starting to cover up some of the more evocative images. Is that reacting to the West? In a way, yes, but it's more reacting to Hindu modernity and the rise of Hindu fundamentalism. So you have to look at both of those. And
Yeah, they did cover many things, even like one of the goddess that is squatting is completely covered with like fabric, so nobody can see it. They covered the 8th century like walls with paint and plaster. They put like a gold thing at the top just to be like, oh, we have like this richness. They're changing it completely, and I think it's because they want to bring more like tourism, and they want to make it more pleasant to see.
yeah, but not Western.
Than at Bulba.
Middle class Hindus.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And that's where you see this constant dynamic with vibrant, rigid, original local traditions when they're being marketed to a pan-Hindu, trans-local kind of culture that's developing. They are anesthetizing and deodorizing, which are the terms that White uses that I particularly like. And at one point, it did seem like it was very much an appeal to the West. To me now on the ground, it doesn't feel like an appeal to the West anymore, as much as it's an appeal to aspirational Indian middle classes who want a nice, friendly Hinduism that doesn't challenge anything. And even there probably comes from Western and colonial gaze at one point, but it's kind of doing its own thing now, even though that's its origins. It's tricky. It's confusing. You can
Yes.
spend your whole life thinking about this. It's fascinating.
Thank you for the feedback. H, do you have anything else to say?
Not really.
Okay.
I was wondering, yeah, just about this question. I mean, my feedback was basically the same thing as Allison's.
Mhm.
Like, how does that speak to your larger argument?
I also added a comment at the end, Jonavi. I'm curious about like where you're going to go with the topic. What other concepts are you pulling in? Where are you going to be looking at? How are you comparing it? I don't know. I was just curious about that. Like, would there be a place in the beginning that you could mention what would all be talked about here, right? Because you so succinctly cover just your experience of Kamakya and your understanding of it in this part. So I'm just curious about where you're going to go. And so I think that would be a really good thing to pull into this early section.
Yeah, before these 6 pages, I have an abstract and more about the history. But as I read, especially with the mythology, I'm like doing reading the Puranas right now, and like things around the Puranas, other authors and scholars, I'm leaning more into like how a myth becomes veracity to support a religion, which blows my mind. They're myths. And of course, they have teachings in them, but they become these religions and they verify history
You gotta
as
put that in
true.
there. That's so cool. That needs to be front and center.
I agree. Absolutely, I agree. Try to think of it this way, Jody.
Okay.
You have a text, right?
Mhm.
So you have the text, you have the myths in the Kalika Purana. You
Yeah.
also have a text that is, if you just talk to people, what do the uncles, what do the aunties, what do the young people say that you just chat with? That's a text too, the oral text.
Yes.
And I would encourage you to think of the temple itself as a text. And an art historian would say you can read the temple like one would read a book, and you can see the different myths that come in to be displayed in the iconography, and you can see the folk tales, and you can see the Sanskrit traditions of the larger Puranas. And then with this Kalika Purana, as I talked to you, is one of these Upa Puranas, which is a later Purana that's very much responding to the specific local area. And you have texts that are called Mahatmyas that are responding to that local area as well. So that you're starting to see the wide range of text and to be able to see that text is more than what's just in a book. Text is more than just what's in Sanskrit. Yeah. So there's a lot there. I don't want to say too much more because I can see you're getting there on your own. I do really think you need to take a look at the first couple of chapters of David White's Kiss of the Yogini.
Okay, I will. I
Talking
have
about
it.
goddesses, especially. It's a ripping good read too, at least I think. And you'll see the way he's able to, as White does better than anybody else, talk about various levels of Sanskrit sources, but also art history, material history, regional history, and whatnot. I can't remember what main temples he's looking at. I'm pretty sure he deals with Kamakya to some degree, but he's also looking a lot at Khajuraho. Khajuraho, which is the Kinki Yogini temples, which I've never made it there, but the artwork is just stunning and beautiful. And a lot of people would say this is elucidating the Kama Sutra because there's all these bodies doing kinky weird stuff. It's like, it
I
doesn't
saw
look
some
like
of
anything in the
I saw
Kama
some of it in Nepal too.
Oh,
But it
yeah.
makes sense because that Shakta Tantrism traveled to Nepal
Yes.
and mixed with
Nepal was
Buddhism.
always more goddess oriented. Always was.
Yes. Oh no, so many things. My brain's gonna explode. Okay, thank
That's
you.
good. You want write all those so many things down. All right, I'm pretty pleased with where this is at right now. All right, at this point, it's kind of funny because I'm having John V run the show, so that's ridiculous at this stage. Did you have any? But now take your moment, and this is a point where the author responds, and we'll shut up for a second, and so you respond to what people have said.
Well, I feel like I've been responding already, but
That's the
yes,
flaw in what we've been doing. Yes.
yes, I will move that. I think that makes more sense because even as I'm writing, I'm like, okay, like I have these things to say, and then more things I'm coming to my mind, but where am I going? I want to know where am I going. Otherwise, what
But
happened to me is
own
like I
that
get
moment.
blocked.
When you get that point of I want to know where I'm going, I'm having all these other ideas. That's a great
Yes.
point to open a new document and literally write out where am I going on this question, and then do 15-20 minutes of just generative writing on that topic and see what comes up. Now, this is the thing to remember though. You've got to remember where you stored that. Because otherwise,
Oh,
generate
okay.
this big document and then you'll be like, oh, I had all these great ideas that I never looked at again. So once you do that and do that generative piece, I would recommend make a little note to yourself in your draft and say generative piece, and then the title of the file you saved under it, and like 3 keywords, just to remind yourself to go back and look at that as you're working things together. That you want to remember what you've written, especially in the more informal stuff.
Okay. Great. And then, okay, we're here, points, topics, or bringing. Okay, there is another topic that responding to Allison that they're coming up, and is that the relationship of Shaiva, this is so bad, Shaiva Tantrism and Shakta Tantrism, and how maybe Shakta Tantrism is like the feminization of Shaiva Tantrism. And like that idea is like coming up too.
That in there. Put it in there.
But like how?
I
Like
could
where?
talk to
I'm
you
like,
about that for like an hour and a half. That's a big idea.
Yeah.
So Allison's right. Put it in there, but don't let
and
it
then
eat your
another
time.
one, and then another one is that you cannot study Tantrism without studying the goddesses.
Yes. So there's a classic art. You know what? Talk to Ben Williams about this. Have a little chat with Dr. Williams about this because he'll have a more nuanced view, but and knows where you're coming from a little bit more. But to very briefly say, there are arguments that would say that Tantra is in fact an emergence of an underground current of goddess worship found throughout India. And the argument is what Tantra is integrating those goddess cults into the more masculinized sort of understandings of religious traditions in India up to the 8th century. Because suddenly all these goddesses come in and turbocharge everything. I'm not sure I buy it, but that is a big argument that comes up quite often. And you're going to have to figure out where you want to go with that. Is it that the goddess traditions that have always been there, because yoginis are really actually yakshinis, and look to David White's piece on this in Kiss of the Yogini, the first couple of chapters will really explain that well. So is it that these goddesses were always there, and then the tantrikas started taking them seriously in order to domesticate them under, the standard trope of masculine domination that happens everywhere? Or were those goddesses always there in the Sanskritic tradition, which I think they were, in fact, and they get turbocharged by bringing in more local deities? Or is there a perennial goddess tradition throughout India and throughout time that is gaining dominance here, but was not having the same dominant discourse before Tantra. And remember this forever. The goddess is not a feminist. And well, there's a great article called "Is the Goddess a Feminist?" If you, I can send it to you. It's wonderful. The goddess is not a feminist. And just because people worship goddesses doesn't make them feminists, as I'm speaking to 3 women. I don't think I'm really mansplaining here. I'm religious studies splaining. I mean, it's no surprises. But you want to be really careful, especially in sort of the new agey type Naropa world, or the world that one of my journalist friends in the 90s just called Schrammers. I'd said one point, I'm like, I just don't know if I have the energy. And he's like, by energy, you mean like the energy to do a thing, not in a Schrammer sense of energy. And Schrammer, or Ashrammer, really makes me giggle, because also you have the Shramana tradition, those who strive, which were the early Buddhists and the Jains and the Upanishadic Hindus were Shramanas, and you could call them Shrammers. Anyway, so that's one of my degenerations. But just because they worship a goddess doesn't mean they are feminists, obviously. Also, cows and women are worshipped in India. That means that they are also worked to death. India loves women so much they'll worship them and work them to death, just like cows. The life of a cow in India is not that great. It's like the life of many women in India, not that great. So always be wary when you hear people talk about like a prototypical like goddess underground or matriarchy or whatnot. There are matriarchies in India. They're way up in the Northeast. They're still around. But even in matriarchies, it's still mostly men running the show. So always be aware that when men start worshiping women, or anyone start worshiping women, that is not a feminist argument. I know I keep saying that, and I know you don't, and I know you all don't think that, or I know you have a nuance of that, but it's so important, and it's so pervasive. Like, I listened to this jackass telling me this story about real Tantra and a person he met who was initiated and cannot practice Tantra anymore because traditionally in this person's initiation ceremony, the young male initiate would have oral sex copulation with like 4 of the women in the group that would do the fluid gnosis of initiation. And he's like, and now people are so sexually restrictive that they could never practice that. I'm like, there is so much more going on there. And deep down, I'm looking at you wanting to say, I would like to have more oral sex in my workshops. And I do know that this guy does sex workshops with people. And I went batshit on this guy on a blog at one point.
Oh.
And it ended up getting deleted, but it's out there somewhere. Oh, I was ready to take this guy's head off over Zoom. Okay, so
I have
Lots there.
another thing. I have another thing that I don't know if I should like mention, but it's around that the myth says that Sati threw herself to the fire, and there is this tradition that when the husband dies, passes away, the wife needs to burn herself to death. And I mean, and even I don't remember the name of that practice, but
It's called
comes out
Sati.
from like Sati.
It's Sati. It's
So
the same word.
should I
Right,
mention
so
that? Should I
I'll
just
do this
like
real
what should I
quick
do?
for you. There's a goddess Sati, and she is one of Shiva's many wives.
Yes.
Now, is there the goddess that unifies all goddesses? Shrammers will tell you so. I will say no. No one worships the goddess in Hindi. They'll talk about a Shakti, and they'll say that a Shakti is a manifestation of universal Shakti. But this whole notion of there being 3 gods in India, Shiva, Vishnu, and the goddess, the goddess is not really actually there. It's different goddesses. So you have a goddess named Sati. Goddess Sati is Daksha's daughter. Daksha refuses to have Shiva to the sacrifice. Shiva shows up, slams his lingam down, demons running all over the place, because Shiva's kind of playing dice, smoking pot, hanging out with rough types. Still doesn't work out. Can't go to the sacrifice. Sati jumps on the fire. She dies. Shiva is overwhelmed, and he dances his dance across the universe, dropping her body parts while carrying her body. And the major Shakti Peeths correspond to each area of their body. Shravan
Yeah.
and I are arguing about this right now, and I think she's wrong. I think there's a notion that these temples function like a reliquary, a place where the bones of the saints are placed and then venerated, or stupas, which have bones and relics of the Buddha or other holy people in them, or memorial places. I would argue that just because her goddess vagina did not physically fall there, if people interact with the place as being the receptacle and as being the very yoni of the goddess, I think it functions as a relic. This is why I kept
Yeah.
telling you, John B, to look at that essay on relics. That's an argument I'm working on. Okay, so there's all that. The other side of it is, mostly in Western India, but all over India, there's a practice called sati. Sati is argued to have been introduced by Muslims. It was not. Sati was argued to have been pervasive. It was not. The British used sati, in fact, to say that Hindus did not treat women right, the irony of ironies, and that they could not be allowed to have unregulated behavior because they would end up burning witches and burning women and doing satis. Most of the reporting on satis was recorded by people who are not Hindus, and some of them are pretty horrific, and they sound like, you know, young girls who are widowed being drugged and forced into the fire and whatnot, and I'm sure that happened to some degree. However, what we find out by looking more is that sati was not was not as common as we thought. It was not introduced by Muslims. It also was a practice that's a lot more complicated, because what happens when a sati's husband dies, he's connected to a vira, a hero. And by ascending the pyre with him, she does the same thing that a heroic death does. She shoots her soul through the sun and then comes back as basically an invisible superhero. And she watches over her family for generations. She'll watch over neighborhoods. She'll watch over places. You can go throughout India and you can find local satis that are spoken of as like little local deities. And then when they're forgotten after innumerable generations, if another sati isn't associated with them, they get grouped together into just being like a general goddess sati. So what we find, in fact, is David Whyte's wife, Katrine Weinberger Thomas, wrote a book called Ashes of Immortality that I've taught several times. It is the best book out there on sati. What we find with sati is it was often resistant. It was often associated with heroic Kshatriya families. And the wife dying wasn't because of inherent impurity, but it was out of her desire for apotheosis, becoming a deity in and of herself. Also, a number of satis don't die. And they get out of they survive it, and then they become basically like living gods and gurus. So at certain points, there were large amounts of them. Then there weren't that many. Now they're very rare. They're spoken of by Muslims and by Britishers as one of the most barbaric things Hindus do. As usual, they don't really get what's going on, and they refuse to look at anything about female agency. And as I told you, Gayatri Spivak, who translated Derrida's Grammatology and is an Indian gal herself. Boy, it sounds funny to call her gal. I love that woman. She's tough. She's a hoot. Saudis in combat boots, baby. I think she's at Columbia now. So she wrote a famous essay called Can the Subaltern Speak?, which became this huge thing in post-colonial studies, asking if the subaltern, the colonized person, has a voice. But what was she writing about? In fact, and this is the thing that people don't talk about, she was writing about sati. And she was writing about like uncovering discourses that were not colonial discourses. This is not the language of decolonizing, but finding how the colonial experiment changed ways of being, speaking, and understanding the self under colonialism. And it was actually about sati. So I recommend highly you read Ashes of Immortality and learn about how satis are superheroes. I think that bears going into your paper, John B, but I don't think you need to go that deep into it. I think you can.
Yeah, that's what I
do
thought.
need to discuss the sati and Shiva sacrifice and her body getting there, but I think you could just have a couple of sentences on sati and say that, and I would say something very basic, such as that, you know, this goddess sati has the same name as this practice of sati And then I would say, well, you can say whatever you want, but I would say which were traditions uh, of a woman committing suicide as self-apotheosis or something like that. But you could also just say, yeah, burning wives, it sucks. Deep under all of it, though, is an interesting idea, and that's that when a man dies young, he's thought to have died because his wife has been so sexually aggressive that she's drained him of all his potency. His cooling semen has gone into her fieriness. So again, woman, fire, burning,
Yeah.
flame, pyre, gateway for the husband to go to heaven.
Yeah.
Wife to go across the sun in the same way, same languages that yogis do in the Mahabharata, go across the sun and then return with magical powers to help their families.
Yeah.
There's my Sakti rant.
I like seeing the facial expressions of all these conversations.
Okay, anything else?
Okay.
We gotta get moving on.
That's it. That's it. Thank
All
you
right,
so much.
you'll get full comments from me soon enough. And you never know, maybe you'll get some more comments from your colleagues. Maybe we'll be good at this.
Okay.
All right, John, you're still running the show. Call on the next person.
I guess H. And I can read it. Allison read already. Yeah.
I get a little 2 minutes here. I don't need 2 minutes, but I feel like I still don't have a primary source that I'm working with, and that feels kind of ungrounded.
Yeah.
And so that's really why I want to meet with you, Dr. Ulrich, because I'm like, where
Okay.
do I go?
Mm.
We'll
So
talk about that
that's
today.
great. That is that's a big thing for me. So I feel a little like I'm kind of pulling on threads. And I don't know if I have anything else to say. I guess the readings that you sent out, Dr. Ulrich, with the different kind of topics and religious studies were really helpful. And I've been wondering about like how central the body is in this and how central experience is and going back and forth, and then also transformation, but mostly the first two.
Well, the problem, Age, is that your paper lends itself to kind of a phenomenology of an idea. Now, I would like you to ground it in a specific source. Let's keep working on that, but if that doesn't happen, then what we need is to turn your piece into what I would call a study in intellectual genealogy. In that sense, you will look at a set of ideas, how various thinkers come to them, and then at the end, you'll juxtapose those into an innovative reading of those ideas. And that way, you'll have turned your secondary sources into primary sources. Ideally, if you had someone like Heidegger, you'd be like, and all of this is found in these 3 paragraphs of Heidegger. So you'd put all your ideas in, and then you'd connect it to a specific reading of Heidegger. But well, we just need to see where we get to. All right, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's great. I'm glad to know there's other options too there, but I would like to ground it in a primary source.
There are other
I
options
can.
only if we have exhausted the others.
Great. And then yeah, I think that's it. I think let's just read it.
Okay.
All
Okay,
right.
I will start.
Esmeralda. Yes.
Introduction: Spirituality and evolution of the body and the locus for non-ordinary experiences. Religion, secularity, and spirituality. From the animal magnetism of Mesmer to the spiritualism of the Fox sisters to the breathwork practices of New Age circles, the body has long been viewed as a medium for spiritual or meaningful non-ordinary experiences. The term spirituality has its roots in the Latin verb spiro, to breathe, or figuratively, to be alive, express, or inspire, and the noun spiritus, which the Oxford English Dictionary defines as the animating or vital principle in living things. Initially having strong ties to religion, particularly 19th century Christianity, spirituality has become part of the descriptive continuum constructing the religious and the secular. In the spiritual category, as opposed to religious, connected to specific denominations or traditions, and secular, denotating everything that is non-religious, the boundaries between the corporeal and the ineffable becomes less distinct. In this case, the body, the physical medium for the breath, takes a more central role in experiences labeled spiritual. The context of the body creates one of the necessary cornerstones of this research, which draws upon scholarship that explores the direct, lived experience phenomenology of religion. It is from individuals' breathing body that meaningful, non-ordinary experiences, which might be labeled as spiritual, emerge. A spirituality has a concept straddles. Spirituality has a concept straddles two seemingly opposed ideas, religion and the secular, while simultaneously breaking free from their constraints through centering the bodily experience. Sorry, that's thoroughly me. The concept of religion formed through ideas of morality, obligation, and tradition, Latin word religio. In response, the idea of secularity emerged as a way to distinguish between religious and non-religious realities. Hence, to be secular is to be worldly and requires the religious as a sounding board to validate its existence as non-religious. On the other hand, since spirituality's origins lie in the ideas of internal vitality and breath, the concept of spiritual does not necessarily depend on the externally imposed rules of religious tradition. Similarly, any notion of secularity or non-spirituality dissolves into pervasive nature of the spiritual, the invisible fluid or energy that connects all animate and inanimate things according to Mesmer. According to Mesmer, the spiritualism belief is an infinite intelligence or non-dual oneness, often promoted in New Age spirituality. Wow. In all of these examples, the individual's experiences of a spiritual nature are paramount. The Mesmerists, the medium, and the New Age all view their bodies as the local of spiritual experience, the experience of magnetic energy, a spirit contract, or feelings of connection with a higher power. Therefore, experiences or notions labeled as spiritual carry with them a lineage of connections to the unseen aspects of the body, i.e., breath, energy, visions. Spirituality's associations, attentions with intention with the religious and secular arena is due in large part to the self-spirituality that emerged from 1960s New Age movement. The popularity of New Age ideas are partly attributed to the 19th century ideology of New Thought, a mind-healing movement that believed in an omnipresent creative divinity and its indwelling nature in all of humanity. With potential roots is Mesmerism's and Plato's theory that unchangeable and eternal abstract forms, say spiritual forms, are more real than anything else. The New Thought movement inspired an inward-gazing, spiritual-seeking impulse among Americans in New Age communities. Self-spirituality in the New Age movement placed primary authority on the individual's experience when it came to the spiritual matters rather to on a specific religious institution or ideology. As a result, the evolution of New Age spirituality became foundational to the contemporary qualifier spiritual but not religious. Spirituality meets capitalism. The transformation, I just want to say that is so age, I think. Spirituality meets capitalism. The transformation of the counterculture movement into the spiritual marketplace, a spirituality that privileged individual choice over organized religion, brought the concept of spirituality into the mainstream. In fact, a growing number of Americans identify as spiritual but not religious, from 18% in 2012 to 22% in 2023. These Americans are more likely to believe in spiritual energies, unseen spiritual forces, a higher power, and something spiritual beyond the natural world than their religious but not spiritual peers. Unsurprisingly, the beliefs of the SBNR hold similarities to the magnetic fluids of mesmerists, the clairvoyance of spiritualists, and the inner divinity of New Thought. What sets these spiritualities apart, however, is the glaring individualism of SBNR culture. The choices made by the SBNR American cannot be divorced from their capitalist and individualistic cultural context. A Google image search for spirituality or New Age spirituality yields many of the same photos. Solidarity figures in a cross-legged meditation position, mostly white, presenting and feminine or neutral silhouettes against cosmic backdrops. Symbols and practices from various traditions, for example, chakras, tarot, astrology, crystals, dream catchers, taijutsu, smudging, call for emanating or auric light, and magical and surreal scenes. Even though this imagery highlights examples of cultural appropriation, a white presenting person with dreadlocks, for instance, and confirms the self-focused choose your own spiritual adventure archetype of American SBNR. These individuals may exhibit a critical awareness while attending to the spiritual seeking. I'm giggling because I know many of these people, sorry. They often adopt metaphysical views that are plausible and coherent with other beliefs they judge to be true. So true. More judgments that fit with their intuitions and experiences, and practices that are elevating the meaningful rather than dull, repetitive, or useless. Regardless how calculated some SBNR may be in approaching their spirituality, however, they cannot seem to escape the impulses of toxic individualism and American spirituality. Self-reliance, individual interest over collective interest, and a bootstrap mentality describe the me culture of the US, a culture that is also becoming more spiritual over time, and whose religiously unaffiliated population is projected to continue to rise as the same global population declines into 2050. Yet, this spirituality manifests as toxic individualism disguised as spiritual seeking in a country that touts success, prosperity, and abundance. You can connect to your true self and tap into your highest potential, all on your own time and at your own pace, through the latest and greatest product retreats and classes. Thus, an individual's spiritual path is tailored and promised the transcendence of everyday life, which in a capitalist society is predicated on productivity and a strong work ethic. With this context, then, the typical spiritual American may A, treat their spirituality as just another item, on their never-ending task list. B, rely on their spirituality as a way to escape the demands of capitalism and their overworked body. Or C, interpret any non-ordinary or spiritual experiences as pathology, fodder for self-reflection, or a mark of specialness. Spiritual experiences. Experiences that are labeled spiritual have many names: mysticism, trance-like states, self-transcendent experiences, religious experiences, possession, peak experiences, non-ordinary experiences, flow states, ontological shock, and even altered states of consciousness. Regardless of label, these experiences are difficult to pin down and adequately study because they are subjective. However, 4 characteristics of transcendental moments are an inability to fully express the experience in words, a sense of real understanding or revelation, an impermanence, and a passivity akin to overwhelmed. Whether or not someone labeled this experience as spiritual rather than any other number of descriptors depends upon their background, social and cultural context, and aspirations, among other factors. Though challenging to conduct this consistent efficacy, studies on spiritual experiences seem to demonstrate the notable scholarly and public interest in understanding these windows into the ineffable. And Taves and her colleagues attempt to create an inventory of non-ordinary experiences by surveying the qualities, direct interpretations, and cultural influences of experiences deemed spiritual or deemed religious. Participants in America and India use the term spiritual to describe both an inner orientation, like true self, and a higher power, which aligns with the results of a 2023 Pew Research Center survey of America's spirituality. Its findings include that 64% of spiritual US adults claim that being connected with my true self is an essential aspect of their definition of spirituality, while 74% equated with being connected with something bigger than myself, for example, higher power. Similarly, nearly half, 45% of the US adults have reported experiencing a connection with something from beyond this world, and just over 70% felt a depth sense of wonder about the universe, both of which shed light on the prevalence of a spiritual orientation in the general American public. More ? Embodied spirituality applying here's the word. Help me out.
Aphanipoesis.
Aphanipoesis.
Perfect.
Embodied spirituality applying aphanipoesis to non-ordinary experiences. Since spirituality origins connects into the body and the body is the locus of experience, the direct experience of a non-ordinary event labeled as spiritual is, at its core, an embodied experience. This kind of subjective experience can never be adequately and totally distilled or neatly organized in a rational sense.
Mhm.
Something as intangible as the invisible world of possibility within a human being defines any attempts at reductionism and control. In fact, warm data, the interactions, dialogues, and stories that become embedded in us without our conscious effort must remain wild, as untamable as emerge itself. If this data is to offer the experiencer a window into their own unconscious understanding, The resulting imaginations of a non-ordinary experience must be attributed to the unseen connections at work beneath the surface of one's awareness. Connections that are influenced by one's social and cultural contexts. Contrasting argument, psychology, and trying to figure myself out. Within a conductive cultural context, the interpretation of non-ordinary experiences as spiritual imbues them with meaning that can inspire collective action, a feeling of vision that propels one to create or act with collective benefit in mind. In light of this reality, I offer a new twist on a pre-existent thought-reason term that is inspired by Nora Bateson's playful, constructed concepts of aphaniopoiesis.
Aphanipoiesis.
Say it again, please.
Aphani or apani, but this is probably aphanipoiesis.
Aphanipoiesis.
Yeah.
Aphanipoiesis, and grounds it in the flesh. She defines aphanipoiesis as the unseen coalescence that brings about vitality, originating from Greek words aphanis, notice, unseen, and poiesis, to bring forth, embodying aphanipoiesis, a companion to embodied spirituality and experience filters. Describes the meaning-making process taking place underneath the surface of one's life within the context of one's body. This constant coalescence of information, memories, stories, and cultural ideologies made at one point or another become stirred and brought to the surface of one's awareness through a non-ordinary experience, resulting in an imaginative insight. The individual may view this non-ordinary experience as having a spiritual nature, an experience that is meaningful or special and inspires feelings of connection to oneself, life, nature, a higher power. Whether or not an individual interprets an experience as a spiritual, however, relies on a cultural conditioning and the unseen and unconscious connections taking place within them.
Okay.
Wow. Any comments or yes, of course. Is this the part where we do comments or
Yeah.
does each? Okay, yeah.
First off, did you notice how quicker we're reading through our work today? That's actually a sign that your work and your language is improving. One of the ways I know that my work is getting about ready to go to the publisher is when I can read it really quick. I read it out loud really quickly. I don't stumble over anything. Nothing makes me go, what? There are no, as in reading through, we call it, there are no clunks. It just, boom, it just flows. So that's one thing that I notice with y'all's drafts is that we're able to read them quicker because their language is better refined, which is naturally going to happen from having sharing work and editing work, but it's also because y'all are doing the real work of learning best writing practices and getting practiced at using those practices. So this is all to say, Wooly Bully. Okay.
I think I have more clarity in what you are doing each, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like how pretty much spirituality or having a spiritual experience can be biased according to our own like personal experience and background. Is that what it is? And then I really liked where you were when you were talking about, I think you call it spirituality and meets capitalism. That whole thing I think is pretty good. And I like how you added like statistics and but also get your point across that is being packaged as this thing that if you have a credit card, you can access it pretty much. So I really like that. And many of the things you were saying, I was giggling because it's like, I know these people. Like I've seen it, I know these people, and this is how they express themselves. This is true. Yeah. And it was very clear, it was very like to the point. Yeah, I liked it.
So I'm going through, one, I think that if this Afani Poesis is going to be a big deal, it needs to be alluded to at the front. I like at the beginning that you're putting out your definitions. That looks good. But from the first paragraph, I'm not sure where the rest of the paragraph is going. Based on this fantastic sentence, in the spiritual quest category, as opposed to religious, connected to specific denominations or traditions, it's interesting that you're doing that, and secular, denoting everything that is non-religious, the boundaries between the corporeal and the ineffable become less distinct. All right. In this case, the body. All right. So we're really going to be looking at the body. The physical medium for the breath. Really? The body's the physical medium. All right. Okay. We'll go with that. It takes a more central role in experiences labeled spiritual. From that, I think the rest of this is going to be about the body and breath. But you're actually going more into experience. So how are we defining sort of experience as and sort of general human experiences as as connected to the larger project. So breath comes up, bodies come up, and I just kind of kept being like, all right, each paragraph stands on its own well, but I'm not sure how the paragraphs are in relationship to each other. As you get down to the end, this embodied spirituality, you got a lot of stuff, but I mean, you're getting into sort of experience and non-ordinary experiences. I didn't know that that's where I was going to get. From the beginning, I'm looking at religion and spirituality, this thing about the breath, a context of the body. All right, I liked all that. And then it is from an individual's breathing body that meaningful non-ordinary experiences, which might be labeled as spiritual, emerge. I mean, again, so if it's about body and the breath, then everything needs to connect to the body and the breath. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I feel like I've been trying to, and I am like going off on other, because I'm like trying to define things
Yeah.
and like embed it in like a bigger context. And so it's like, I think the through line is the body, probably the breath
Yeah.
as well, but I think the body really, like, that's what I keep coming back to, is like the body. So but yeah, it's like lost in there, and that's why I'm wondering about a primary source that has to do with the body or something.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
we are in a yogic studies program. If you really want to talk about the body, there's just so much writing on the body. However, think of it this way. If you're turning everything to be organized around the body, that means then that the main text is going to be, your primary text is going to be the human body. Can you think of it that way? So in fact, the thing that you're turning itself back to constantly is that very body. I don't know.
I love
need to
that.
think about it more. Any other comments for H?
I've been quiet because I've been trying to kind of just organize my thoughts. And the first thing I wanted to mention was in the capitalism section. I love that. I was laughing with Jonavi because I really appreciated your descriptions on the capitalism and the spirituality. But it also made me wonder, like, so what? Is it bad? Is this idea bad? Can you explain why this is an issue in society today, right? Like, why is cultural appropriation an issue? Why is that people just say, oh, well, it helps me find who I am? What is it that means that that's an issue, right? Like, I'm curious about the other perspective. Why should I care, right? Not to sound harsh. I hope that doesn't sound harsh. And then I'm looking at your last section, and I was curious because you said I offer a new twist on a pre-existing thought, right? And I kept looking, I was like, what's your twist? What are you going to do? What are you going to explain? How does working at with aponeurosis, what is that going to offer you here? And I was thinking maybe then what you needed to be doing was looking at practices and techniques that incorporate this idea. Like, how does it change the conversation about capitalism and spirituality if you're looking at this, right? Like, I feel like that might have something to do with the question you're trying to get to. Like, how are these things connected, and how can they then change or alter what society is looking at and examining from? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what I was trying to lead to in all of this was some kind of like, we're really individualistic. And if we're going to have these experiences, but then we're like interpreting them as like, this is benefiting me, then of course it's going to like be this more individualistic
Right.
You even use the
framing.
term, H even uses the term self-spiritual, which is intriguing to me and needs to be explained. So it's also like, I mean, there's this point where we write something like, no, I'll introduce this idea that I don't explain called self-spiritual, but oh, I'm going to get to something on that. I think you will. That's a good topic. And it's also like, I'm going to offer this novel twist. It's easier to write that you are doing a novel twist than writing the actual novel twist. And that's a thing that almost all writers come across. So you write that thing, and then you go back and like, wait, I haven't proven that thing. And then you go and prove it. But you've got the instinct recorded right there, correctly there.
Right. And then like the badness or like the wrongness, I don't know if it's like, maybe I am saying it's bad or wrong because like I want us to be more collectively minded. And
Well, you don't say it's bad or wrong, but you need to demonstrate. You need to demonstrate why being collective is better than being individualistic. Right now you're saying it, but explain it. And I mean, I think a lot of this is not necessarily an evolution, but a lot of this type of thinking does start with the power of positive thinking and new thought, then into boomer religions and the boomer generation. Also, you mentioned counterculture, and you need to explain what you mean exactly by counterculture, because there's lots of them. And then leading into, the Gen Xers like me and people now who are having a whole, seemingly to me, a different relationship to religion than the baby boomers did. There's a contrast there somewhere. But I mean, I think the heart of this argument is that this super commodified religion is an outgrowth of that 1960s spirituality thing. I'm not quite sure where to go with it, but there's something there.
Yeah. Yes, I'm in a conundrum, but maybe a good one.
I think you are in a good one. Let's you and I will talk about this a little bit more. Okay, Allison.
Great.
Our time is getting short. Allison is up.
So with mine, this is like one of the last big chunks that I needed to kind of write up. So I think it's still a little rough at times. There's some like big concepts that I feel like I'm trying to work through that might not be as clear as they need.
Yeah, and at this stage, the way you're outlining things, this is a great spot to have that. You like wave your hand at a thing and say, and there's this. I'll figure out it later.
And that's what it is right now. It's still a little more just outlining. My hope is once I get my first like quotes draft, I'll try and get rid of the outline as I go back through and start re-editing. So this is later. So I hope you can all tell what it is that I'm focusing on and arguing. Let me know if you don't, though, and I'll be quiet.
H, can you read, please?
Yes. Great. The The linga and the pavas are experienced in one of the three realms of sentient creatures stated in Kara. Say it for me once. Why am I struggling with this? Karika, thank you. Karika 53. The elemental realms are concisely the eightfold divine realm, the fivefold animal realm, and the one human realm. Karika 53 is a culmination of the Samkhya Karika's emergence process by determining who qualifies within the Bhautika Sargaha, or the elemental creation. The Bhautika Sargaha is the evolution, which represents the classical form of Samkhya ontology and metaphysics, is termed Sargaha, or emanation. The elemental creation is realized once the tattvas, the non-elemental qualities of Prakriti, emerge. The elemental creation arises as the foundation of the experience of the material world. Thus, the emergence process of the tattvas is fully realized through the combination of the linga and the bhavas and the Bhautika Sargaha. The Bhautika Sargaha determines where and why one experiences the emergence process of Prakriti. Karika 53 determines in the Samkhya Saptativriti, animals and humans live in their designated realms because they
Saptativriti.
Say it again.
Sankhya Saptativriti.
Sankhya Saptativriti.
Yeah.
Animals and humans live in their designated realms because they share a manifest nature. The manifest nature requires the being to live in one of the realms and determines one as existent due to the possession of a linga. Whereas in the Sankhya Saptativriti discussion on the divine, the author does not mention the linga to describe the divine realm. The divine realm is eightfold. For example, the realms of Brahma, Prajapati, Indra, the ancestors, Gandharvas, Yakshas, demons, and Pisachas. Thus is the eightfold divine realm. Since the beings with the divine realm are not described to possess a linga, their existence lacks the constituents required to experience Prakriti. Bronkhorst defines Ishvara to lack a buddhi, the instrument of understanding, and no permanent material accompaniment, meaning he is without the tattvas of ahamkara. The karmendriyas and the buddhindriyas that enable interaction and perception of the world. Therefore, the divine realm contains beings who lack the required constituents to experience Prakriti. The author of the Yuktidipika includes demons into the definition of Bhautika Sargaha and encourages to describe the world as fourfold to better encapsulate all the beings that exist in Prakriti. The unknown author of the Yuktidipika,
Yuktidipika, the small lamp on connection. You may be familiar with the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. And I think that has a long A at the end of it too.
That explains the apertures of life are, however, told as four, and the demons also should be mentioned, or the mention should be made without differentiation into gods, men, or lower animals. Karika 53 mentions demons, Raksham, but the Yuktidipika explains the reason they are included. The demons are included in the place of Indra because they were gods earlier. The threefold system is due to the demons lumped in with the divine realm, causing the creation of the beings is of three kinds only. The commentarial conversation regarding demons demonstrates the shared natures existing between the beings in the divine realm. Karika 54 explains that the predominance of the gunas in each realm, the upper is full of sattva, the middles rajas, and the foundational tamas. The three gunas are present in each of the realms, but the predominant one determines the quality of lived experience. For the divine realms, the gunas are the essential powers of the divine, which are merely existent in a perfect equilibrium. The divine realm is without the experiential tattvas, but it is the experience of the gunas that facilitate their existence and explains why the divine being's existence is without suffering. The Samkhya Saptativriti states that in the divine realm, even their passion and ignorance are, but purity is predominant. Since this is the case, therefore the gods are primarily happy. Ben/me. The predominance of sattva in the divine realm places these beings closer to pure consciousness because sattva closely resembles the pure consciousness of Purusha. The divine realm exits closest to the connection of pure consciousness and is without suffering. Whereas the human realm, purity and ignorance exist, however, passion is present as predominant. Since that is the case, humans are mostly in a state of suffering. Ben/me. Rajas is characterized by pain, actuation, and is stimulating. And humans, they are of the nature of attainment and are most active, which participates in the suffering experienced by humans. Lastly, the animal realm is full of ignorance, spanning from plants and minerals to domestic animals. Tamas is characterized by indifference and is heavy. The Yuktipedika describes the animal and human realm as the two realms mentioned without difference, because the animal and human realm exist further from Purusha. The predominance of agunas within each realm explains the reason for human suffering is dictated by the interplay of the gunas and the manifestation process they inspire. Karika 54 complements the three realms or sargaha, which manifest the material world of Prakriti. Once the emanation is complete, the Samkhya Saptativriti states, on this point, he, Ishvara Krishna, teaches the three realms based on the manifestation of mind and matter as either the realm of beings, bhavas, the realm of existence, Bhautikaha, or the manifest linga realm. Together, the three sargahas facilitate experiential and the material structure of Prakriti. And Samkhya Saptativriti concludes Karika 53 with, thus the duty of the manifestation of mind and matter is complete. Only after the tattvas and the three sargahas are formed does the commentary declare Prakriti complete. The Gaudapada Bhashya summarizes the complete list of entities as the non-elemental creation, creation of the subtle elements, creation of the dispositions, creation of the gross elements and the divine, human and subhuman creations form the 16 varieties of creation produced by nature. The development of Prakriti is completed once the internal faculties, Puri, Ahankara, and Manas, the Linga, Bhavas, and the Bhautikaha, Sargaha have formed. The Samkhya system requires a complete investigation of the emanation process to cogently explain how the philosophy leads one toward liberation. After the process of manifestation is completed, the Samkhya Karika focuses on attaining salvation. Karikas, I'm not sure what those Roman numerals mean. Does anyone know?
Hold on.
Okay.
It's 55 to 60 or 69.
Beautiful. Are concerned solely with the question of salvation. All of the preceding verses dealing with the emergence and functioning of the manifest world serve as a kind of prelude or preparation for the doctrine of salvation. Samkhya philosophy teaches the process to separate from the experience of Prakriti through acquired knowledge. To achieve liberation, or kaivalya, one aspires to redirect its attention away from the phenomena and realize that its very existence is dependent on Purusha as source of consciousness. Kaivalya is often translated as isolation, or is understood as the discriminative realization of the difference between Purusha and Prakriti. To realize Purusha as pure consciousness, one needs to separate it or isolate it from the linga. By separating one's focus from the linga or the tattvas that bind one to the material world, one learns to discriminate between the tattvas to attain knowledge, jnana. The knowledge which resides in the buddhi, intellect, is one of the 8 bhavas. Karika 64 states, from the study or analysis of the principles tattvas, the knowledge or salvation knowledge arises. The linga and the bhavas are essential to attaining liberation because it only occurs through the study of tattvas designed to separate from the linga and cultivate salvation knowledge of the bhavas. The purpose of the manifest world is as the location where one attains kaivalya. The process to achieve liberation begins in the world of experience, and therefore liberation must take place on the side of Prakriti. Karika 63 states, as in the world, a man engages in actions for the sake of cessation of desire. Prakriti exists for the sake of Purusha, and humans participate in the material world to follow the path of Kaivalya, to free the soul and witness Purusha. Prakriti, or the manifest world, serves its own purpose by serving the purpose of the other. It becomes what it is not in order to bring about what it is. For example, not Purusha. Salvation knowledge is the realization that the material world appears as consciousness when in fact it is everything that is not consciousness. Prakriti is the servant of Purusha in that its existence is contingent on assisting Purusha to be seen. The function of Purusha and Prakriti is therefore one is pure witness and the other is that which is witnessed, respectively. Thus, liberation must occur in the material world because it is the only space that allows Purusha to be witnessed or realized. The experience of Kaivalya occurs in the ordinary world. A human who achieves Kaivalya implies a kind of intuitive realization or discrimination which separates out pure consciousness from everything that is not consciousness. The person continues to exist in Prakriti, but he dwells in abstract, pure isolation, a kind of translucent emptiness. The salvation knowledge achieved through discriminating between the tattvas facilitates a state of being separate from the desires and impulses that causes suffering. Rather, living in the state of Kaivalya is, as Philip Moss says, a type of existence under one's own control and wholly itself. A liberated being continues to exist in the material world, resting in the knowledge that they live in the absence of life as ordinarily understood, which is maintained until death. Sankhya describes the path of salvation while living among the manifest experience of Prakriti. Therefore, the experience of tattvas and the sargahas simultaneously manifest the material world and offer the way to live within it, removed from the experience of suffering. Finn.
Okay, y'all, go ahead. I'm writing comments, so please go ahead.
Is the silence bad?
So, no, I noticed how with Allison's paper, everybody's always so quiet because it's such a large topic. And it's so like, it's like doing math, it's like calculations and like words. And so it's always like, it's not that it's bad, is that it requires a lot of like mental capacity. It's very stimulating to me. So that's why at the end I'm like, wait, I want to read it again to see if I understood what I think I understood. But it's not that it's bad. Does that make sense? It's almost like reading Foucault in a good way.
It's like reading when you're reading materials like this. It always reminds me of being in geometry class in high school and doing proofs, where you'd get a couple of diagrams or problems, and then you would have to explain each step you go through to solve the problem, and then actually put an algebraic or trigonometry law to justify each step of the proof. So what's come through seems to me on the clear side. The questions I have though is I'd like to know more about this relationship between Purusha and Prakriti but there are some interesting questions here, such as the notion that Prakriti exists for the sake of Purusha. And then you're talking about Purusha being conscious. So if Prakriti exists for the sake of Purusha, then who made Prakriti? It's like, how do you know that it exists for the sake of Purusha? And then you'll figure this out. You'll explain later, the difference between singular Prakriti and multiple Purusha. That can go in there. In general, what I see is you have very good discrete arguments, but it's hard to see how they exactly are linked together, which is exactly how I write when I have an outline at this stage. So it needs some more connective tissue. And it needs, I would say, and you should all think about this, common language throughout. Just try to unify and use the same nouns and verbs, not repetitively, but over and over again. And especially do not change a noun or a verb because of repetition if there's any chance that it will be less clear and have repeated language. That's always a big trip up and writing at this stage. All right, Allison, what would you say is, you've been working on an idea of a main thesis, but what would you say is the thesis of this particular piece? What's the one idea that unifies everything?
That unifies everything.
That everything's kind of related to.
I think for me, it's that the way the Sampyakarika is constructed, that once the emergence process is considered complete, it's when these three sargas, the Linga, the Bhavas, and the Bhattika Sarga, have been discussed, that material experience and the material world is manifest, is completed. And so then Prakriti's job is done, right? So I think that's when you can actually start to explore this idea of liberation. And from there is what it's related
Well,
to.
but I mean, Prakriti's job isn't done. Prakriti hangs out. We're connecting to it all the time. It's always acting. It's
Yes.
done in liberation, in which poetically they say, and then the dancer leaves the stage.
Yes.
So maybe, do you mean that Prakriti is active in emanation and then is not active in
Yeah.
the life of the individual? But the problem is Prakriti is me, my senses, my indriyas that are Prakriti themselves go out, have a sparsha with a sense object,
Mhm.
transmogrify, they change. My buddhi changes. My
Mhm.
Prakriti touches another part of Prakriti and changes, and it comes back and it gives me the sense that I've seen.
Right.
It's going somewhere there with that, and I had to cough and I lost it. I'm sorry. Whew. Yeah, so emanation.
Mhm.
And then I see that you want to do something with liberation. I made the comment on there already. I said, well, how do these Sankhya Karika and commentator folks, how do they know about liberation? Are they liberated themselves, or are they meeting liberated people? Or, and I would argue that in almost all cases, liberation is more rhetorical than anything. It's like the implications of this argument to affect liberation are a key step in the Indic process of philosophy. But I'm kind of the opinion that 12 people got enlightened in the whole history of human existence.
Or in the
Not sure about those
commentaries,
12.
there's
Pardon?
not a lot of no, in the commentaries, there's not a lot of explanation on who has experienced liberation. How do
Yeah,
they
it's because they're not meeting anybody. They
No.
don't know anybody.
Yeah.
So that's something to be aware of in your argument and to nuance your argument. Why
Yeah.
does liberation look different in all these texts? Well, because they're not describing the same thing. They're
Right.
not describing anything. It's the implications of it.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, y'all, I'm fading fast. I'm gonna call class at this point. I'm gonna meet with H right afterwards. Before I meet with H, is there anything else you two need from me? Is there anything I can help you with? Anything? Okay. Email me. Boy, I'm about to have the most horrible 4 days. Anyway, so I will not see you next week, and I want you to start working on your creative version. I'm particularly interested in what we're going to see from Allison working out a creative retelling of Sankhya one way or another. But I have a feeling writing that will really give you a lot more ideas. I don't know, you can do that or do something else, but repackaging it in a narrative always for me makes it click. And so much of Sankhya is a story. It's a story about Purusha getting lost and finding that it is not Prakriti, and that has a beginning and a middle and an end. It has a subject, it has characters. There's a story that's in there. So always try to tell a story. All right, y'all. You two, I'm done with. Okay. I'll see you guys, y'all, next time. I'm looking forward to our meeting in 2 weeks. Enjoy your week off. Spend the time writing.
Feel better.
Take care. All right. Let me just stop this
Thank you.
recording.